Sometimes the people we judge the hardest are the ones carrying the heaviest burdens. Sometimes a single moment of curiosity can change two lives forever. Sylvia Crane had spent years building walls around her heart, trusting no one, relying only on herself. When her new mechanic Devin started leaving work early each evening, she assumed the worst. Was he lazy? Unreliable? His tired eyes and worn jacket told her everything she needed to know, or so she thought. One evening she followed him. What she found at the end of that quiet drive wasn't what she expected. It was a father sitting beside his daughter's hospital bed, holding her hand, reading her stories, refusing to let poverty or exhaustion steal his love. What would you do if you discovered your assumptions about someone were completely wrong? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sylvia Crane's penthouse apartment sat 43 stories above the city, glass walls offering a panoramic view of everything she had conquered. The space was immaculate. White leather furniture, abstract art chosen by an interior designer she'd met once, a kitchen so pristine it looked like it had never been used. Because it hadn't, not really. Sylvia ate most of her meals at her desk or picked up something quick on the way home. Cooking for one person seemed like a waste of time, and time was the only thing more valuable than money. She stood at the window now, watching the sun rise over the skyline, a cup of black coffee cooling in her hand. This was her routine. Wake at 5:30, coffee while reviewing emails, shower, dress in one of a dozen nearly identical power suits, and arrive at Crane Properties by 7. She had built her real estate development company from nothing, absolutely nothing, 23 years ago, with a small inheritance from her father and a determination that bordered on obsession. The brass key to her first office still sat in a small frame on her desk downtown. That tiny space above a dry cleaner had been everything to her once. Now she owned 3 buildings in the financial district alone. Success, everyone said. Look at what Sylvia Crane has accomplished. A self-made woman. An inspiration. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was how empty it all felt at 3 in the morning when she couldn't sleep. When the silence of her perfect apartment pressed against her chest like a weight, her phone buzzed. Beverly, her assistant of 15 years. Morning meeting pushed to 9. Contractors are running behind on the Riverside project. Sylvia typed back a quick acknowledgement. Beverly was the closest thing she had to a friend, though Sylvia would never use that word aloud. Friends were liabilities. People you trusted were people who could hurt you. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. 15 years ago, she'd had a business partner. More than a partner, really. Richard had been her lover, her confidant, the person she'd let see behind the carefully constructed walls. Together they were going to build an empire. Together they would be unstoppable, until she discovered he'd been quietly draining company accounts, forging her signature, preparing to disappear with everything they'd built, everything she'd built. The betrayal had nearly destroyed her financially and completely destroyed her emotionally. She'd managed to recover the business, barely, but the part of her that trusted, that loved, that hoped, that had died in a lawyer's office on a Tuesday afternoon in October, she hadn't let anyone close since. Not romantically, not even platonically. Beverly was efficient and professional. Her employees were competent or they were gone. Her business associates were useful or they weren't. Everything in her life had a purpose, a function. Nothing wasteful, nothing vulnerable. Except for one thing. Sylvia had a weakness, though she'd never admit it in those terms. She loved vintage cars. Not as investments, though they were that too, but genuinely loved them. The curves of a 1967 Mercedes, the sound of a well-tuned engine, the smell of leather and oil and careful restoration. There was something honest about old cars. They didn't pretend to be anything other than what they were. You could see their damage, work on their problems, restore them to beauty. Not like people who hid their flaws until it was too late. 3 months ago, she'd purchased a 1967 Mercedes 250 SL that needed complete restoration. She'd taken it to Sterling Auto Restoration, a small shop in a neighborhood that hovered somewhere between working class and barely getting by. The owner, Kurt, was a man in his 60s who'd forgotten more about cars than most mechanics would ever know. He'd looked at her Mercedes with the reverence it deserved and promised to treat it like his own child. He'd also introduced her to his newest hire, Devin. Sylvia remembered that first meeting clearly. Devin had been bent over an engine, his hands black with grease, concentration absolute. Kurt had called him over, and he'd straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that looked like it had been white once, maybe a decade ago. "Ma'am," he'd said, nodding respectfully. His voice was quiet, measured. "Beautiful car. Original paint?" "Mostly," Sylvia had replied, caught off guard by the genuine appreciation in his eyes. "Some touch-ups over the years. We'll take good care of her." He'd smiled, a small, tired smile, and returned to his work. That had been 3 months ago. Since then, Sylvia had visited the shop weekly to check on progress. The restoration was meticulous, perfect. Devin's work was exceptional. He treated each part like it mattered, like it deserved his full attention. She appreciated that. What she didn't appreciate was that he left early, every single day. 5:30 on the dot, sometimes 5:15 if he thought no one was watching. He'd wash his hands quickly, grab his jacket, worn canvas with a tear in one sleeve, and disappear. The first few times, she'd assumed he had another commitment. Doctor's appointment, perhaps, errands, but every day. That wasn't appointments, that was a pattern. And patterns, in Sylvia's experience, usually meant something worth hiding. She'd mentioned it to Kurt once, carefully casual. "Your mechanic keeps short hours," Kurt had shrugged. "Devin works harder than anyone I've ever hired. If he needs to leave at 5:30, he's earned it." That non-answer had only made her more suspicious. What was worth leaving work unfinished? Her Mercedes had been sitting in the same state for 2 weeks, while Devin waited for parts that Sylvia had verified with the supplier had actually arrived 3 days ago. Yesterday, she'd arrived at the shop unannounced at 4 in the afternoon. Devin had been there, methodically working on someone else's Corvette, his movements efficient and precise. She'd watched him for 20 minutes from the small waiting area. He'd glanced at his phone 4 times, checking the clock. At 5:15, he'd stopped mid-task, set down his tools with obvious reluctance, and headed for the door. He'd paused when he saw her sitting there. "Ms. Crane, didn't know you were coming by today. Just checking on progress," she'd said coolly. "Parts should be in next week. I'll start on the suspension system then." His hand was on the door handle. Eager to leave. Eager to get away. "Next week? I was told the parts arrived Monday." Something had flickered across his face. Guilt? Worry? Before his expression smoothed. "There was a mix-up with the order. Kurt's handling it. I really need to go, ma'am. I'm sorry." And he'd left. Just like that, leaving her sitting there with a car that could be finished but wasn't, and a growing certainty that something wasn't right. Beverly had listened to her complaints that evening over the phone while Sylvia paced her empty apartment. "Maybe he has a sick relative," Beverly had suggested gently. "Maybe he's taking night classes. Maybe he just values his personal time. Maybe he's lazy," Sylvia had countered. "Maybe he's taking my money and not doing the work. Or maybe," Beverly had said, with the patience of someone who dealt with Sylvia's suspicions for 15 years, "you're looking for reasons not to trust him because trusting people is hard for you." Sylvia had hung up. Not angrily, she never got angry with Beverly, but because the words had hit too close to home. Now, standing in her pristine apartment as dawn broke over the city, Sylvia made a decision. Tonight she would follow Devin, see where he went. See what was so important that he'd leave work unfinished day after day. She'd know the truth, and then she'd decide what to do about it. After all, she hadn't built an empire by ignoring her instincts. And her instincts told her that Devin was hiding something. She just had no idea how right she was, or how wrong. Thursday evening arrived with an overcast sky that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. Sylvia had spent the day distracted, watching the clock in a way she hadn't done since her early years building the company. At 4:30, she told Beverly she was leaving early, a rarity that earned her a raised eyebrow, but no questions. She drove to Sterling Auto Restoration and parked 2 blocks away, positioning her sedan where she had a clear view of the shop's entrance, but wouldn't be easily noticed. The whole thing felt absurd. She was a successful businesswoman, not some private investigator. But she couldn't shake the need to know, to understand, to confirm her suspicions so she could stop thinking about it. At 5:20, Devin emerged from the shop. He'd changed out of his work coveralls into jeans and a faded blue Henley that had seen better days. He walked to an old Ford pickup truck, at least 15 years old, maybe 20, that sat in the employee lot. The truck coughed twice before starting. Sylvia waited until he pulled onto the street, then followed at a careful distance. They drove through the downtown area, where her office buildings gleamed with corporate logos and expensive architecture. Devin's truck continued east, into neighborhoods where the buildings grew shorter and the paint jobs less fresh. Past the commercial district into residential areas where kids played on sidewalks and corner stores, sold lottery tickets and cigarettes. Sylvia's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She rarely drove through these parts of the city. Her world was carefully curated: upscale restaurants, executive meetings, her penthouse, the auto shop because of her cars. This was different. This was real life for people who couldn't afford to avoid it. The truck turned into a parking lot. Sylvia's breath caught. Riverside Community Hospital. The building was aging but well-maintained, surrounded by modest landscaping and signs directing visitors to various wings. She parked in a visitor spot several rows away and watched as Devin got out of his truck. He stood there for a moment, rolling his shoulders like a man preparing to lift something heavy. Then he walked toward the main entrance. Sylvia sat frozen. Hospital. He was going to a hospital every day. The suspicion she'd been nurturing that he was lazy, unreliable, cutting corners, dissolved like sugar in hot water. Hospital meant something serious. Someone sick. Someone he cared about enough to leave work early every single day. She should leave. This was private. This was none of her business. She'd found her answer. He wasn't being dishonest. He was dealing with something difficult, but she didn't leave. Instead, she got out of her car and walked toward the entrance, propelled by something she couldn't quite name. Curiosity, yes, but also something deeper. A need to understand the full picture. The hospital lobby was quiet at this hour, past the afternoon visiting rush but before evening. A few people sat in the waiting area. The smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner hung in the air. Sylvia spotted Devin at the gift shop near the entrance, counting change from his pocket with careful attention. She hung back, pretending to study a directory board while watching from the corner of her eye. He purchased a small bouquet of daisies, simple, cheerful flowers, and headed for the elevators. Sylvia followed. She felt like a ghost, invisible in her expensive suit among the tired visitors and exhausted medical staff. Devin pressed the button for the 4th floor. Sylvia slipped into the elevator just as the doors began closing. He noticed her, did a double take. Ms. Crane? Her mind went blank for a fraction of a second. Then training took over. Devin, I didn't expect to see you here. Visiting someone. His hand tightened on the bouquet. Is someone you know here? Checking on a donation, she lied smoothly. My company supports the hospital foundation. He nodded, clearly uncomfortable but accepting the explanation. The elevator doors opened on the 4th floor. A sign on the wall read, Oncology Wing, Oncology, Cancer. Devin stepped out without another word, his shoulders curved inward like a man walking into a storm. Sylvia followed at a distance, her heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with being caught. The corridor was lined with patient rooms, some with doors open, most closed. Devin walked to room 412 and paused at the door. Through the window, Sylvia could see a young woman in the bed. Early 20s, dark hair pulled back, pale but smiling as she looked up from a textbook. The transformation in Devin was instant and complete. The tired mechanic with worn clothes and perpetually slumped shoulders straightened. His face lit up with genuine joy. He opened the door, and the young woman's face mirrored his expression. Dad! Sylvia stepped back, positioning herself where she could see through the window but wouldn't be immediately visible. She knew she should leave. This was deeply private, but she stood transfixed, watching. Devon presented the daisies with an exaggerated flourish that made the young woman laugh. He pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. They talked. Sylvia couldn't hear the words, but she could see the animation in their faces. The young woman gestured at her textbook, and Devon leaned over to look, pointing at something on the page. Teaching material, Sylvia realized. The woman was studying to be a teacher. A nurse entered the room, checked monitors, said something that made all three of them smile. As the nurse left, Sylvia heard fragments of conversation. Doing so much better this week. Iris, your father never misses a day. Iris. The young woman's name was Iris, Devon's daughter. Sylvia found herself near the nurse's station, close enough to overhear two staff members talking. That's the family in 412, right? A younger nurse asked. The single dad. Devon, he's here every single evening. The older nurse shook her head with admiration. His daughter's been fighting leukemia for 18 months. They've been through 3 rounds of chemo. The bills must be crushing him, but he never complains. Just shows up, brings her flowers. Reads to her. That's love, the younger nurse said softly. That's what strength looks like, the older one replied. Sylvia felt like the floor had shifted beneath her feet. 18 months. Every single evening. She'd been questioning his work ethic, doubting his commitment when he'd been carrying this weight. A daughter fighting cancer, medical bills that would destroy most families. And still, he came here every night with flowers and a smile. She turned and walked quickly toward the elevator, her vision blurring. The pristine hospital corridor seemed to tilt and sway. She jabbed the elevator button, willing it to come faster, needing to escape before the emotions building in her chest could break free. In her car, she sat with her hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the hospital entrance without seeing it. All her assumptions, every single one, had been wrong. Not just wrong, cruel. She'd looked at a man showing up despite exhaustion, leaving on time to be with his dying daughter, and she'd called him lazy, unreliable, untrustworthy, a memory surfaced unbidden and unwelcome. Her own father working himself into an early grave. She'd been building Crane Properties then, so focused on success that she'd barely noticed his declining health. She'd promised to visit. Next week, next month, when this deal closes, when that project launches, always later, always tomorrow, until there was no tomorrow. He'd died of a heart attack at 61, and she'd been in a business meeting across town. She hadn't even gotten to say goodbye. Devon wasn't missing time with his daughter. He was choosing her every single day, regardless of the cost to his career, his finances, his future. He was choosing love over everything else, and Sylvia had judged him for it. She drove home through streets that looked different now, like she was seeing them clearly for the first time. Her penthouse felt especially empty when she walked in. She poured a glass of wine she didn't drink and stood at the window watching the city lights blur through tears she hadn't shed in years. What kind of person had she become? When had protecting herself turned into suspecting everyone? When had strength become the same as being cold? She thought about Devon's face when he'd entered that hospital room. That pure, unguarded joy despite the circumstances. That was what mattered. Not buildings or money or empires built on distrust, connection, love, being there for someone when it counted. Sylvia set down her wineglass and made a decision. She didn't know what she could do, but she had to do something. She couldn't just walk away now that she knew. Devon and Iris deserved better than that. They deserved better than she'd given them. Sylvia didn't sleep that night. She lay in her king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows shift as car lights swept past 43 stories below. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Devon's face transforming when he entered that hospital room. The pure love in that moment haunted her. By morning, she'd made several decisions. First, she would return to the auto shop and actually see Devon as a person, rather than an employee who disappointed her. Second, she would find a way to help without being obvious about it. Pride mattered. She understood that better than most. If she came charging in with offers of money or charity, she'd humiliate him. She needed to be subtle, strategic. She arrived at Sterling Auto Restoration at 9 in the morning. Gert was in the office sorting through invoices that looked like they'd been sorted many times before. Ms. Crane, didn't expect you today. I wanted to check on the Mercedes, see if there's anything we can do to speed up the process. She kept her voice professional, businesslike. I know Devin mentioned waiting on parts. Kurt scratched his beard, looking uncomfortable. Truth is, the parts came in. He's had a lot on his mind lately. Good worker, best I've ever had, but everyone's got their limits. I understand. And she did now. Is he here? Out back, working on a Mustang restoration. Sylvia found him in the work bay, bent over an engine with the focused intensity she'd noticed before. But now she saw other things too. The way his hands trembled slightly when he reached for a tool, the dark circles under his eyes, the worn work boots with duct tape holding one sole together. Devin, he straightened, surprise flickering across his face. Miss Crane, I was going to call you today. The parts for your Mercedes, I know they're in. Kurt told me. She stepped closer, studying the Mustang. Beautiful car. 67? 68. His voice warmed with enthusiasm. Owner wants it restored to factory condition. It's been sitting in a barn for 20 years. Seems like a waste. Something this beautiful, left to decay. Some things are worth saving. He ran his hand along the fender with obvious affection. Takes patience, though, and time. Can't rush quality work. They talked about the restoration process for 20 minutes. Sylvia asked questions she already knew the answers to, just to hear him explain with that quiet passion. He knew these cars inside and out. Not just the mechanics, but the history, the craftsmanship. What made each one special? You really love this work, she observed. Only thing I'm good at. He smiled, but there was sadness in it. My dad was a mechanic. Taught me everything. Said there's dignity in working with your hands, making broken things whole again. He sounds wise. He was. Past tense. Another loss. Devin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted, worry replacing the brief contentment. He typed something quickly, then slid the phone back in his pocket. Everything okay? Sylvia asked, though she knew it wasn't. Fine, just fine. He picked up a wrench, set it down, picked up another. His hands weren't steady. Devin, she waited until he looked at her. If you need time off or flexibility with hours, you should talk to Kurt. Everyone needs help sometimes. Something flickered in his eyes. Suspicion. Hope I manage. Always have. Managing and thriving are different things. He was quiet for a moment. My wife used to say that. She'd tell me I was so busy carrying the world, I forgot to actually live in it. His voice went soft. She died 5 years ago. Car accident. Since then, it's just been me and my daughter. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. Iris, my daughter, she's everything. Smart, kind, wants to be a teacher. She was in her 2nd year of college when he stopped, jaw tightening. When things got complicated. But she'll get back there. She will. Sylvia's chest ached. He didn't know she knew. Didn't know she'd followed him, seen everything. The deception felt heavy. I'm sure she will, Sylvia said gently. With a father like you, how could she not? He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the exhaustion behind his eyes. Not just physical tiredness, but the bone-deep weariness of carrying an impossible weight for too long. I should get to work on your Mercedes, he said finally. I promise by next week, take your time. I'm in no rush. She meant it. Quality over speed, right? After she left, Sylvia sat in her car and called Beverly. I need you to research something for me, discreetly. How discreet are we talking? Invisible discreet, Sylvia took a breath. Devin Carter. He works at Sterling Auto. I need to know his financial situation. Medical bills, debt, everything. Beverly was quiet for a moment. This is about yesterday. The hospital. How did you... I've worked for you for 15 years, Sylvia. I know when something shifted. Beverly's voice softened. What did you find? Sylvia told her all of it. The hospital, Iris, the leukemia, the daily visits. When she finished, Beverly sighed. And now you want to help? Yes. Without him knowing it's you, he has his pride. I understand that. Do you? Beverly asked. Or are you protecting yourself by keeping distance? The question stung because it was probably true. Just get me the information. By afternoon, Beverly called back. The details were worse than Sylvia had imagined. Medical bills exceeding $300,000. Insurance that covered barely half. Payment plans that would take Devin decades to clear. A second job on weekends doing oil changes at a quick lube place. Recent plasma donations, she could see the records. $40 twice a week. He was selling his blood to help pay for his daughter's treatment. Sylvia closed her eyes. In her world, $300,000 was a line item in a budget. A nice bonus. Money she'd spend on art she didn't look at or renovations she didn't need. For Devon it was insurmountable, life-crushing, the kind of debt that destroyed futures. "There's more," Beverly said quietly. "Iris needs experimental treatment. Not covered by insurance at all. Estimated cost is another $150,000, and without it, her chances drop significantly." Sylvia made decisions quickly. It was what had made her successful. Set up a meeting with Riverside Hospital's Financial Assistance Department. "I want to know their programs, Sylvia, and see if Kurt needs more restoration work. High-end projects. The kind that would require overtime hours from his best mechanic. You're going to funnel money to him through work. I'm going to make sure he's compensated fairly for exceptional skill." Sylvia kept her voice level. "There's a difference, is there?" But Beverly's tone said she approved. "I'll handle it." Over the next week, Sylvia increased the scope of her Mercedes restoration. She wanted custom leather, she decided. Special detailing, chrome work that required specialist attention. The kind of additions that would legitimately double the bill and require extensive hours. She also arranged for catered lunches to be delivered to the shop. "For everyone," she told Kurt. "You work hard. You should eat well. It wasn't charity if it was for the whole team." She left coffee gift cards anonymously in the break room, brought pastries from an expensive bakery downtown, and claimed she'd overordered for a meeting. Small things, careful things, things that might help without being obvious, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. One afternoon, she watched through the shop window as Devin's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. He said something short, hung up, and stood completely still for 30 seconds. Then he walked to the bathroom, and when he emerged 10 minutes later, his eyes were red. Sylvia's hands clenched. Something had happened. Something bad, Kurt told her later reluctantly. Iris had a setback. Needs that experimental treatment sooner than they thought. Devin asked for an advance on his pay. "I wanted to help, but the shop's barely breaking even as it is." That night, Sylvia made another decision, a bigger one. She would visit Iris herself, not as the rich woman helping from shadows, but as someone who cared. She'd find a way to make it natural, to connect honestly, because Beverly had been right. She wasn't just protecting Devin's pride by staying hidden. She was protecting herself, keeping distance so she wouldn't have to feel too much, wouldn't have to risk caring and being hurt. But she was already caring. Already involved, already feeling more than she had in years. Time to stop hiding behind walls. Time to step into the light, even if it was terrifying. Sylvia chose a Wednesday evening to visit the hospital. Wednesday was when Devin worked his second job at the quick lube place, giving her a window when she could meet Iris without explaining her presence. The fourth floor felt different in evening light. Quieter, the harsh fluorescence softened somehow. She found room 412 and knocked gently on the doorframe. "Come in," a young voice called. Iris was sitting up in bed, textbooks spread around her like islands. She looked up with a welcoming smile that faltered slightly at seeing a stranger. "Hi, can I help you?" "I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Sylvia. I'm a friend of your father's." The lie came easier this time, though it still tasted wrong. "Oh." Iris's smile returned, genuine and warm. "Dad doesn't talk about friends much. I didn't realize he had any at the shop besides Kurt. We've gotten to know each other through my car restoration." Sylvia stepped into the room, taking in the details. Photographs taped to the wall, Iris and Devin at various ages, smiling at beaches and parks and kitchen tables. A stuffed bear wearing a tiny graduation cap. Teaching certification study guides stacked neatly on the bedside table, and draped across the foot of the bed, a hand-knitted blanket in shades of blue and grey. "That's beautiful," Sylvia said, gesturing to the blanket. Iris touched it with obvious affection. "I made it for Dad, something to keep him warm in that freezing shop. He won't wear it there, says it's too nice, but I catch him with it at home sometimes." Her eyes shone with love. He pretends he's tougher than he is. Sylvia sat in the visitor's chair, the same one she'd seen Devin occupy. He seems pretty tough to me. He is. But not the way people think. Iris closed her textbook, giving Sylvia her full attention. People see how hard he works and think that's his strength. But his real strength is how he loves. Even when it hurts, even when he's exhausted. He just keeps showing up. The words hit Sylvia somewhere deep. When was the last time she'd shown up for anyone? Really shown up? Not just written a check or delegated the task to Beverly? How long have you been here? Sylvia asked. This time? 2 weeks. But overall, Iris's expression clouded. 18 months of treatment. In and out. Some days are good. Some are... She shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. Your father mentioned you were studying to be a teacher. Iris's face lit up. Elementary school. I love kids. The way they see the world, you know. Everything's possible to them. Everything's an adventure. She gestured at the textbooks. I'm keeping up with coursework online. My professors have been amazing about extensions. I'll finish my degree. Maybe not on the timeline I planned, but I'll get there. I'm sure you will. Have to. Dad sacrificed too much for me to give up now. Iris's voice caught slightly. He doesn't think I notice, but I do. The extra shifts. The way he packs the same lunch every day because it's cheapest. How his truck sounds worse every month because he can't afford to fix it. Tears welled in her eyes. He works on million-dollar cars for other people and drives that falling-apart Ford because every penny goes to keeping me alive. Sylvia's throat tightened. He loves you. That's not sacrifice to him. That's choice, I know. But I still hate it sometimes. Iris wiped her eyes. Sorry, I don't usually fall apart on strangers. You're not falling apart. You're being honest. Sylvia found herself leaning forward. Can I ask you something? What do you want? Not what your father wants for you, or what you think you should want. What do you actually want? Iris was quiet for a long moment, considering. I want to finish school. I want to teach. I want Dad to stop working himself to death and actually live a little. Maybe date someone, have friends, take a vacation. She smiled sadly. He was different before Mom died. Lighter. She brought out this joy in him. After the accident, it's like he put all that capacity for happiness into me. I'm his whole world, and that's beautiful, but it's also terrifying. What if something happens to me? What does he have left? The question hung in the air between them. Sylvia had no answer because Iris was right to worry. She'd seen that kind of singular focus before, in herself, directed at her business instead of a person. When you poured everything into one thing, losing it destroyed you. Tell me about your mother, Sylvia said gently. Iris's expression softened. She was a kindergarten teacher. That's where I got the bug. She'd come home with stories about her students, and you could just see how much she loved them. She believed in seeing the good in people. Even when Dad got frustrated with someone, she'd find something to appreciate about them. She touched the blanket again. She taught me to knit. Said making something with your hands was a way of putting love into the world. She sounds remarkable. She was. They were high school sweethearts. Can you imagine? Meeting someone at 16 and knowing they're it? They were best friends. When she died, Dad didn't just lose his wife. He lost his person. The one who knew him completely. Iris's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. I don't think he believes he'll ever have that again. So he doesn't even look. Sylvia felt something shift in her chest. She'd spent 15 years not looking either, telling herself she was too busy, too focused, too smart to risk that kind of pain again. But sitting here with this young woman who faced death with grace and worried more about her father than herself, Sylvia felt the hollowness of that choice. Your father is lucky to have you, Sylvia said. I'm lucky to have him. Iris tilted her head, studying Sylvia with sudden intensity. You're different than I expected. Different how? Dad mentioned you once. Said you were very professional, very focused on getting things exactly right. I pictured someone, I don't know, colder, I guess. But you're not cold at all. Sylvia smiled despite herself. I can be. Ask anyone who works for me. Maybe, but you came here to check on me. That's not cold. Iris's gaze was unsettlingly direct. Are you and Dad, is there something? No. The answer came too quickly. We're just acquaintances, really. Through the car. Okay. But Iris's expression said she didn't quite believe it. Well, if you ever want to be more than acquaintances, Dad could use more friends, real ones. People who see him, not just what he does for them. The words stung because they were true. How many people in Sylvia's life saw her? Really saw her? Beverly, maybe. And even Beverly only saw what Sylvia allowed. A nurse entered to check vitals, and Sylvia took it as her cue to leave. I should go. Let you rest. Will you come back? Iris asked. I mean, if you want. No pressure. But it's nice having visitors besides Dad, and you're easy to talk to. I'd like that. Sylvia surprised herself by meaning it. As she rode the elevator down, Sylvia thought about what she'd learned. Iris wasn't just Devon's daughter. She was a fully formed person with dreams and fears and remarkable emotional intelligence. She saw the cost of her father's love and carried guilt for it. She worried about his future while fighting for her own present. In her car, Sylvia called Beverly. I need you to research hospital foundation procedures. Specifically, anonymous donations designated for specific patients. You met her, yes. And she's extraordinary. They both are. Sylvia's voice cracked slightly. I can't just watch this, Beverly. I can't sit in my tower and pretend I don't know they're drowning. What are you going to do? Whatever it takes. That night, Sylvia drafted emails to hospital administrators, made phone calls to her financial advisor, set up meetings with foundation directors. She moved money around, not all of it, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to change everything for one family, fighting an impossible fight. She knew there would be consequences eventually. The truth would surface. Devon would discover what she'd done. But sitting in her empty penthouse, remembering Iris's question about what Devon would have left if something happened to her, Sylvia realized she didn't care about consequences. Some things were worth the risk. Some people were worth stepping into the light for. Even if you'd spent years hiding in shadow. 3 weeks passed, and the world shifted in small, significant ways. Iris received notification that she qualified for the hospital's emergency financial assistance program, a mysterious fund recently established by an anonymous donor, specifically helped families facing catastrophic medical expenses. The experimental treatment was approved, funded, possible. Devon had called Sylvia that evening, his voice breaking with emotion. I don't understand it. They said we qualified for this fund. It covers everything. The treatment, the medications, everything. I keep waiting for someone to say there's been a mistake. Maybe there are still good people in the world, Sylvia had said quietly. Maybe someone saw your situation and wanted to help. I don't even know how to thank them. Whoever they are. His voice was thick with tears he was trying to hide. They gave me my daughter's future back. Sylvia had ended the call quickly, afraid her own voice would give her away. Beverly had found her in her office an hour later, staring out at the city lights with tears streaming down her face. You did a good thing, Beverly had said simply. I did a necessary thing. There's a difference, but it felt good. Better than closing a deal, or acquiring a property, or seeing her company's value increase. This felt like something real, something that mattered beyond spreadsheets and profit margins. The change in Devon was visible. He came to work with lighter steps, worked with renewed energy. He still left at 5:30 every day, but the desperation was gone. Now it was just love pulling him toward the hospital, not terror and helplessness. He and Sylvia began spending more time together at the shop. She found excuses to visit, checking on the Mercedes, asking questions about restoration techniques, bringing coffee for the team. Gradually, the excuses became less necessary. She came because she wanted to, because talking to Devon felt natural in a way talking to people hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, she found him working on her Mercedes with a vintage repair manual spread open beside him. The manual was clearly his, pages dog-eared, margins filled with handwritten notes in neat, precise script. Is that your writing? She asked, peering over his shoulder. He looked almost embarrassed. Yeah, I take notes on every restoration. Things I learn, techniques that work, mistakes to avoid. This manual was my dad's. He passed it to me when I started working professionally. Sylvia studied the notes, observations about chrome restoration, leather conditioning, engine timing adjustments. They revealed a methodical mind, someone who learned deeply and carefully. You're self-taught? Mostly. Dad taught me the basics, but the detail work I learned by doing. Making mistakes, figuring out fixes. He traced a finger over a particularly dense set of notes. This section here, that's from a '56 Thunderbird restoration that went wrong. Spent 3 weeks solving a problem that shouldn't have existed. Wrote down everything so I'd never make that mistake again. You're a perfectionist. I care about doing things right. He looked at her directly. Same as you, I think. She was surprised by the observation. What makes you say that? The way you run your business. Kurt mentions how precise you are, how you notice every detail. You could have taken your Mercedes to any high-end restoration shop in the city. Places with climate-controlled facilities and espresso machines in the waiting room. But you came here because you cared about the work more than the amenities. I care about things being done properly. Most people care about things looking proper. There's a difference. He returned his attention to the engine, making a minute adjustment. I appreciate that about you. You see past surface impressions. If only he knew how wrong her first impressions had been. How she judged him as lazy, unreliable, when he'd been showing more strength than she'd ever demonstrated in her protected, privileged life. They fell into an easy rhythm, Sylvia asking questions, Devon explaining patiently. She learned about compression ratios and carburetor adjustments, and the particular challenges of maintaining vintage leather. He had a gift for teaching, breaking complex concepts into understandable pieces. You should teach, she said without thinking. You're good at it. Something flickered across his face, pleasure mixed with old pain. My wife used to say that. She was a teacher. Elementary school. She'd tell me I had the patience for it, but I always figured I was better with machines than people. Maybe you're better with people than you think. He smiled, a real smile. Not the careful, guarded ones she'd seen before. Maybe, or maybe you're just easy to talk to. The words hung between them, and Sylvia felt something warm unfurl in her chest. When had she become easy to talk to? Beverly would laugh. Sylvia Crane, known for her ice-cold boardroom presence, easy. But with Devon, it was true. She didn't have to perform. Didn't have to maintain the careful facade of control and competence. She could just be present, learning something new, enjoying another person's company without calculation. Over the following weeks, their conversations deepened. He told her about raising Iris alone, the terror of being a single parent, the guilt of sometimes failing, the overwhelming love that made it all worthwhile. She found herself sharing things she rarely spoke about. Her father's death, the betrayal by Richard that had closed her heart, the loneliness that came with success. You built all that and have no one to share it with, Devon observed one day. They were sitting in the shop's small break room, sharing coffee during his lunch break. That must be hard. I chose it, protected myself, but at what cost? The question lodged in her heart. What had it cost? Everything that mattered, probably. Connection, love, the possibility of being truly known by another person. My wife believed people were fundamentally good, Devon said quietly. Even after seeing so much hardship in her students' lives, poverty, abuse, neglect, she still believed in leading with trust. I used to think she was naive. After she died, I realized she was brave. Trust is terrifying, but it's also the only way to really live. I'm not sure I know how anymore. I think you do. You're here, aren't you? Having real conversations. That takes trust. She wanted to tell him then. Wanted to confess everything, the following, the discovery, the anonymous donations. But fear stopped her. What if he felt betrayed? What if this fragile connection shattered under the weight of her deception? Beverly's words echoed in her mind. Eventually, truth comes out. Better coming from you, but not yet. Not when things were finally good. Not when Iris's treatment was working and Devon was smiling again, and Sylvia felt more alive than she had in 15 years. She visited Iris twice more that month. They talked about teaching methodologies and children's literature and what it meant to build a meaningful life. Iris never asked directly about Sylvia's growing friendship with her father, but Sylvia saw the speculation in her eyes. The hope. One evening, as Sylvia prepared to leave the hospital, Iris stopped her. "He's different lately, happier. I think having a friend helps. I think having you getting better helps. That too. But also you." Iris's gaze was knowing. "Thank you for seeing him. Not just looking at him, but really seeing him. People don't do that enough." Sylvia thought about that on the drive home. Seeing people. Really seeing them. She'd spent years looking without seeing, at employees, business partners, even herself. But with Devon and Iris, she was learning to see clearly, to notice, not just what people showed the world, but what they carried underneath. The Mercedes restoration was nearly complete. Soon, there would be no practical reason for Sylvia to visit the shop regularly. The thought troubled her more than it should. She'd have to find other excuses. Or terrifying thought, simply admit she wanted to see him. No business justification required. Kurt pulled her aside one afternoon. "Whatever you did for that boy, I appreciate it. Haven't seen him this steady in months. I didn't do anything." Kurt's knowing look said he didn't believe her. Sometimes doing nothing is doing something. Just showing up. Being present. That matters. That night, alone in her penthouse, Sylvia stood at the window with her phone in hand. She'd drafted a text to Devon 3 times and deleted it each time. Something simple, casual. "Want to grab dinner sometime?" Just as friends, but even typing the words felt monumental, opening the door to something beyond restoration projects and shop visits. Stepping into territory she'd avoided for 15 years. She set the phone down without sending anything. Not yet, soon maybe. When she was braver. When she could face the possibility of wanting something, someone, and risking the pain of loss again. But the want was there now. Undeniable. Growing stronger each day. And that terrified her more than any business deal ever had. The call came on a Thursday morning. Iris was being discharged. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone dared hope. She still needed monitoring, regular checkups, continued medication, but she could go home. Really home, not just for a few days between hospital stays. Devon called Sylvia directly, something he'd started doing more often. "She's coming home." "The doctors said," his voice broke. "They said she's in remission." "Full remission?" Sylvia closed her office door, pressing her hand to her chest where joy and relief crashed together. "Devon, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. There's a small celebration at the hospital this afternoon. Nothing fancy. Just Iris, me, a few nurses who've been with us through this. I know it's last minute, but would you want to come?" "I'd love to." She arrived at the hospital at 3 with flowers, daisies like the ones Devon brought every evening, and found room 412 transformed. Balloons floated near the ceiling. A small cake sat on the rolling table. 3 nurses crowded around Iris's bed, laughing at something she'd said. Devon stood near the window, and when he saw Sylvia, his face lit up in a way that made her heart stumble. He crossed the room quickly, and before she could process what was happening, he hugged her. A real hug, not a polite social gesture. His arms wrapped around her fully, and she felt the tremor of emotion in his shoulders. "Thank you for being here," he whispered. "It means more than you know." When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sylvia blinked rapidly, fighting her own. The celebration was simple and perfect. Iris radiant despite her pallor, nurses sharing stories that made everyone laugh, Kurt arriving with sandwiches from a deli nearby. Sylvia helped arrange medical equipment for home delivery. She'd already coordinated this part anonymously, but now could participate openly in making sure everything was ready. As the gathering wound down and nurses returned to their rounds, Sylvia found herself alone with Iris for a moment. "I'm going to miss this room," Iris said, looking around. "Isn't that strange? I hated being here, but it was also where people took care of me, where Dad read to me every night, where I met you. You can visit any time," Sylvia said. "Though I hope you won't need to." "Me too." Iris reached out and took Sylvia's hand. "Can I tell you something? And you have to promise not to tell Dad." "Of course. I think he's falling for you." Iris's voice was gentle, knowing. "I see how he looks at you. How he lights up when you call. He hasn't looked at anyone that way since Mom died." "I'm glad." Sylvia's throat tightened. Iris, I know it's complicated. Life always is. But Dad deserves happiness. And so do you. You both walk around like you're afraid to want anything for yourselves. She squeezed Sylvia's hand. Don't be afraid. Not of this. Before Sylvia could respond, Devon returned. Ready to see your palace? He asked Iris, gesturing around the small hospital room with exaggerated grandeur. Can't wait to see what humble abode awaits. Iris played along. Devon had asked if Sylvia wanted to come to the apartment, help Iris settle in. She declined, sensing they needed family time. But 2 days later he invited her to dinner, properly invited her, with advance notice and everything. Nothing fancy, he warned. Just dinner at our place. Iris wants to cook. She's been dreaming about using a real kitchen for months. Sylvia arrived at the address in a neighborhood she never visited, modest apartment buildings, with cars that had seen better decades parked along the streets. Devon's apartment was on the 3rd floor, upstairs that creaked under her feet. The apartment was small. Everything in Sylvia's penthouse closet would barely fit in this living room. But stepping inside, she felt something her expensive space had never offered. Warmth. Photographs covered every surface. Devon and Iris at various ages. Her first day of school, middle school graduation, high school prom. A wedding photo of Devon and his wife, both impossibly young and radiantly happy. Iris as a toddler on someone's shoulders. Birthday cakes and holiday dinners, and ordinary moments made precious by being captured and displayed. One photo in particular caught Sylvia's attention. Iris in a cap and gown. Devon beside her with pride blazing from his face. They stood in front of a high school, both grinning at the camera. That was a good day, Devon said, noticing her looking. She got a full scholarship to state, first in our family to go to college. I worked triple shifts that summer, wanted to make sure she had everything she needed. The framed photo, worn at the edges, clearly treasured, represented everything he'd fought to preserve. Not just Iris's life, but her future, her dreams, the education he'd sacrificed his own comfort to provide. You must be so proud, Sylvia said. Every single day, dinner was simple. Pasta with homemade sauce, salad, garlic bread. Iris moved around the tiny kitchen with obvious joy, showing off her cooking skills. Devon set the table, and Sylvia helped where she could. Though mostly she just watched them work together with the easy synchronization of people who knew each other completely. They ate at a small table barely big enough for 3. Sylvia couldn't remember the last time she'd had a home-cooked meal at someone's kitchen table. Business dinners at restaurants, catered events, takeout at her desk. But this was different. This was family. Tell me about your work, Iris said. Dad says you develop buildings. Sylvia talked about her company, her projects, the satisfaction of transforming empty lots into spaces where people lived and worked. She found herself being honest about the loneliness of it too. How success had come at the cost of connection. But you're changing that, Iris observed. You're here. After dinner, Devon walked Sylvia to her car. The evening air was cool. Streetlights casting orange glows on the pavement. Thank you for coming, he said. Iris was excited all day. She really likes you. I like her too. She's remarkable. She is. He leaned against her car, hands in his pockets. Can I ask you something? And you can say no, I won't be offended, anything. Would you want to do this again? Not because of car restoration or hospital visits, just because, dinner, coffee, whatever. As friends, he paused, met her eyes. Or maybe more than friends, eventually. If you wanted, Sylvia's heart hammered. This was the moment. She should tell him everything. The following, the donations, the months of deception. Start clean. But looking at his hopeful face, the vulnerability in asking, she couldn't, not now. Not when everything was finally good. I'd like that, she heard herself say. Very much. His smile was worth the guilt. Good. That's really good. He stepped closer, and for a moment Sylvia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand, squeezed it gently, then let go. Drive safe, he said. Text me when you get home? I will. She drove back to her penthouse in a daze. The evening played on repeat in her mind. The simple meal, the family warmth, the photographs of a life built on love instead of money. Devon's hand in hers. the possibility hanging between them like a promise. Beverly called, as Sylvia was getting ready for bed. "How was dinner?" "Perfect, complicated, terrifying. He asked you out properly, didn't he?" "How do you always know?" "Because I know you, and I know that tone." Beverly's voice softened. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. I should tell him the truth before this goes further." "Yes, you should, but if I tell him now, I might lose—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Lose what you're building?" "Sylvia, you can't build something real on deception. It doesn't work that way. I know. I just need time to figure out how to say it without destroying everything." But time, as it turned out, was something she didn't have much of. The next week, Iris needed a follow-up appointment. Devon mentioned the hospital's foundation director wanted to meet the families, helped by the anonymous fund, not to reveal the donor, just to share impact stories for future fundraising. "They want us to speak at some gala," Devon said. "Iris is excited. I'm terrified of public speaking, but if it helps other families, I'll do it." Sylvia's blood went cold. The gala, she'd been invited, of course. As a major donor, her presence was expected. If Devon spoke there, if someone made a connection, if the truth came out that way instead of from her, she had to tell him, soon, before the gala, before he found out any other way. But how do you tell someone you've been lying for months? How do you explain that every good thing that happened came from deception? How do you risk losing the first real connection you felt in 15 years? Sylvia didn't know, but she was running out of time to figure it out. The day started with promise. Sylvia had arranged to drive Devon to the hospital for Iris's follow-up appointment with the specialist. Not because he needed the ride, his truck was running barely, but because she wanted the time together, wanted to be part of this good news, this milestone. They met at a coffee shop halfway between their neighborhoods. Devon was already there, 2 cups on the table, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He stood when she entered, and the way his face brightened made her chest ache with something she was finally ready to call by its name. Love, or the beginning of it anyway. "Got you a latte," he said. "Hope that's okay. I realized I don't actually know how you take your coffee. It's perfect." She sat across from him, accepting the cup. "There's a lot we don't know about each other yet." "Yet," he smiled. "I like that word. Implies time, future. Is that what we're building?" "A future." The directness surprised them both. Devon set down his coffee, leaned forward. "I'd like to." "If you would. I know it's fast, and maybe I'm too old to believe in this kind of thing, but—" He paused, gathering courage. "I haven't felt this way since my wife died. Didn't think I would again. Didn't think I wanted to. But with you, everything feels possible again." Sylvia's throat tightened. This was the moment. She should tell him now, before they went further, before the lie grew bigger than the truth. "Devon, there's something—" "Wait." He reached across the table, took her hand. "Let me finish. I'm not good at this, at saying what I feel. But I want you to know that these past months, getting to know you, they've changed me. You see me, not just the struggling single dad or the mechanic. You see who I actually am. And Iris adores you. She told me last night that she's never seen me this happy. Every word was a knife." Sylvia pulled her hand back gently. "You don't know everything about me. I know enough. I know you're kind, that you care deeply even when you pretend not to, that you're lonely but afraid to admit it, that you're brave enough to let walls down." His eyes were so open, so trusting. "What else matters?" "The truth matters," Sylvia wanted to scream. But instead she smiled weakly. "We should go. Don't want to be late." The drive to the hospital was filled with easy conversation. Devon telling stories about Iris's childhood. Sylvia sharing memories of her father. Normal, natural, built on months of growing friendship and something deeper. Built on a foundation that Sylvia knew was cracked at its core. At the hospital, they met Iris in the lobby. She looked stronger every day. Color returning to her cheeks, energy in her movements. She hugged Sylvia like they were family, and maybe they were becoming that. Maybe that was the cruelest part. The appointment was in the specialist's office on the 5th floor. Sylvia waited outside while they went in, giving them privacy for the medical details. She sat in the waiting area, scrolling through her phone, trying to calm the anxiety building in her chest. She had to tell him, today, after the appointment. She'd take him somewhere quiet and explain everything. He'd be angry, yes, hurt, but maybe he'd understand. Maybe the months of genuine friendship would outweigh the initial deception. Her phone buzzed. Beverly, the hospital foundation called. They need to confirm your attendance at the gala. Also, they're doing a short video about the Anonymous Fund. They want to interview Devin and Iris tomorrow. Sylvia's stomach dropped. No, tell them. Tell them I'll handle the donation confirmation, but the video needs to wait. Sylvia, they're excited about this. It's good publicity for the program. I know, I need more time. You're running out of time. Tell him today. I will. I am. After this appointment, she hung up and sat staring at the wall, wondering how everything had gotten so complicated. All she'd wanted was to help, to do something good with her money. How had that turned into this tangled web of deception and growing love and impending disaster? 40 minutes later, the appointment ended. Iris emerged first, face glowing. The doctor says everything looks great. I can start planning to go back to school in January. Devin followed, and Sylvia saw something in his expression. Happiness, yes, but also distraction. He was looking at his phone, frowning slightly. Everything okay? She asked. Yeah, I need to grab something from the car. Meet you both downstairs? He headed for the elevators before Sylvia could respond. Iris linked her arm through Sylvia's as they walked toward the stairs. He's been nervous all morning, Iris confided. I think he wants to ask you something. Something big. Sylvia's heart raced. What do you mean? I'm not supposed to say, but I'm terrible at keeping secrets from people I love. Iris grinned. He's been looking at... She stopped mid-sentence as her phone buzzed. Her expression changed, confusion replacing joy. That's weird. What? Text from the hospital foundation. They want to do an interview tomorrow about the fund that helped us. But they need Dad to bring documentation, treatment bills, the assistant's approval letter, all that. She looked up at Sylvia. They specifically mention wanting to see the donation receipt that came with the notification. Dad has it somewhere. Ice flooded Sylvia's veins. Receipt? Yeah, apparently there was paperwork showing the donation came through Crane Properties Foundation. Iris tilted her head. Wait, isn't that your company? Time seemed to slow. Sylvia watched understanding dawn on Iris's face, saw the moment connection formed between scattered pieces of information, the timing, the amounts, Sylvia's sudden appearance in their lives right when the money came through. Oh my God, Iris whispered. It was you. You're the anonymous donor. Iris, let me explain. But Iris had already pulled away, was already walking quickly toward the elevator. Dad needs to know. He has a right to know, Sylvia followed, panic rising. Please wait. Let me tell him. Let me explain properly. They reached the lobby just as Devin came back through the entrance. He took one look at Iris's face, and his expression shifted to concern. What's wrong? Dad, Iris's voice was shaking. The fund that paid for my treatment. It came from Crane Properties. From Sylvia. Devin's face went blank. He looked at Sylvia, and she saw the moment everything clicked into place. All the coincidences, the increased work hours right when he needed money, the anonymous help appearing exactly when required, her sudden friendship right as his world was falling apart. Is that true? His voice was quiet, careful. Sylvia's hands trembled. Yes, but please let me explain. How long? The quietness was worse than yelling. How long have you known? Since I followed you here. Months ago? You followed me. He said it like he was testing the words, seeing if they made sense. You followed me, found out about Iris, and then what? Decided to play guardian angel? It wasn't like that. I wanted to help by lying. His voice rose slightly. By pretending to be my friend while secretly solving all my problems. Did you think I was too stupid to figure it out eventually? I thought you'd refuse help if you knew it came from me. You're damn right I would have. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing. Do you have any idea? He stopped, looked at her with something like betrayal. Was any of it real? The friendship? The conversations? Or was I just your charity project? Poor single dad needs saving by rich woman with a conscience? That's not fair. Fair. He laughed, bitter. You want to talk about fair? You've been lying to me for months, Sylvia. Months. I trusted you. I let you into our lives. Into my daughter's life. He stopped himself, jaw clenched. I was falling in love with you. And it was all built on lies. The words hit like physical blows. Sylvia felt tears streaming down her face. It wasn't lies. My feelings are real. Everything between us is real. How can I believe that? How can I believe anything you say? He looked at Iris, who was crying silently. Come on, we're leaving. Devon, please don't. He held up a hand, not looking at her. Just don't. You want to help? Stop interfering. Stop manipulating. Just stop. They walked away, Devon's arm around Iris's shoulders. Sylvia stood frozen in the hospital lobby, watching them disappear through the automatic doors. Around her, life continued. People coming and going, oblivious to the way her world had just shattered. Her phone was in her hand. She didn't remember taking it out. Beverly's name was on the screen. Tell him, Beverly had said, but she'd waited too long. And now it was too late. 3 weeks of silence felt like 3 years. Sylvia threw herself into work with the same ferocity that had built her empire, but it rang hollow now. She sat in meetings and heard nothing, signed contracts without reading them, stood at her penthouse window at 3 in the morning, wondering how she'd managed to destroy the best thing in her life. Beverly found her there one morning, still in yesterday's clothes, coffee cold in her hand. You look terrible, Beverly said gently. I feel worse. Have you tried calling him? Twice. He didn't answer. I stopped trying. He asked me to stop interfering, so I'm stopping. Sylvia's voice cracked. I'm giving him what he wants. Is that what he wants? Or is he just hurt and needs time? Sylvia didn't answer. She didn't know anymore. Meanwhile, Devon was struggling in his own way. Kurt noticed immediately. The mechanic who'd been working with renewed energy for months had retreated back into exhausted silence. He left at 5:30 still, but the lightness was gone. Want to talk about it? Kurt asked one afternoon. Nothing to talk about. Son, I've known you long enough to recognize heartbreak when I see it. Devon set down his wrench carefully. She lied to me for months. Made me think we were building something real when it was all he couldn't finish. Was it all fake? The conversations? The time you spent together? I don't know. How can I know what was real and what was performance? Kurt leaned against the workbench. Did she act differently after the money came through? Did she change how she treated you? Devon thought about it. The honest answer was no. If anything, Sylvia had become more open, more vulnerable. She'd shared parts of herself he suspected few people ever saw. But that didn't erase the deception. She should have told me, he said finally. Yes, she should have. But people do foolish things when they're afraid, when they care and don't know how to show it properly. At home, Iris was quieter than usual. She'd tried talking to Devon about it several times, but he shut down every conversation. Finally, one evening while they were cleaning up after dinner, she confronted him directly. You're being stubborn. I'm being realistic. You're being scared. Iris faced him across the small kitchen. She made a mistake, Dad, a big one. But her heart was in the right place. Her heart was in controlling the situation, manipulating outcomes. Or maybe she didn't know how to help without making you feel small. Iris's voice softened. Think about it. If she'd come to you directly and offered money, what would you have said? I would have refused. Exactly. So she found a way to help that let you keep your dignity. Yes, she should have told you eventually. But the help itself, that came from genuine caring. Devon turned away, gripping the counter. I was falling in love with her, Iris. And the whole time she was hiding this massive thing. How do I trust that? How do I trust anything? Mom used to say that trust isn't about never being afraid. It's about choosing to believe despite fear. Iris moved closer. You've been so focused on her lie that you're not seeing your own walls. You're using this as an excuse to run, because being vulnerable terrifies you. The words hit hard because they were true. After his wife died, Devon had poured everything into Iris, used his daughter as both purpose and shield. Loving Sylvia meant risking that kind of loss again. The deception gave him a convenient reason to retreat. Even if you're right, he said quietly, I don't know how to get past this. Then figure it out. Because I've never seen you as happy as you were with her, and I've never seen you as miserable as you are now." That night, Iris went to her room and found an old shoebox in her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them written by her mother over the years. Birthday letters, advice letters, letters meant to be opened at specific moments. Iris had read them all multiple times, finding comfort in her mother's words long after her voice had faded from memory. She pulled out one letter in particular. The envelope read, "For your father when he's ready to love again." Iris had found it years ago, tucked in with her own letters. She'd never shown it to Devon, wasn't sure she was supposed to. But now felt like the right time. She walked to the living room, where Devon sat staring at an old photo album. Pictures of him and his wife, young and impossibly happy. "Dad." Iris held out the envelope. "Mom left this for you. I found it with my letters. I think she'd want you to read it now." Devon took the envelope with shaking hands, his wife's handwriting on the front, familiar loops and curves that made his throat tight. He opened it carefully. The letter was short, but every word carried weight. "My love, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're thinking about moving forward. I know you. You're probably scared, probably telling yourself it's too soon, or disloyal, or that you don't deserve happiness again. Stop. Life is precious and short and meant to be lived fully. I loved you with everything I had, and that love doesn't diminish if you love again. It expands. It honors what we had by proving you're still capable of opening your heart. You'll make mistakes. You'll be clumsy and uncertain. That's okay. Love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, being honest, and choosing someone even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I want you to be happy. I want you to laugh again, to share your life with someone who sees how remarkable you are. Don't hide behind grief or fear or noble suffering. Those aren't virtues. They're prisons. Be brave enough to love again. And if the person you love makes mistakes, give them grace. Give them the chance to be human and flawed and trying their best. That's what you'd want them to give you. All my love, forever and always. Devon read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. His wife's voice so clear in every sentence, giving him permission he hadn't known he needed. Telling him what he already knew but was too afraid to admit. He was using Sylvia's deception as an excuse to run from vulnerability. Yes, she'd made a mistake. A significant one, but her intentions had been rooted in caring, not cruelty. And in the months since, she'd shown him who she really was, someone lonely and guarded, learning to open up, trying to be better, just like him. "I've been an idiot," he said softly. Iris sat beside him, rested her head on his shoulder. "A stubborn idiot, but fixable. I don't even know if she'd want to talk to me after how I reacted. There's only one way to find out." Devon looked at the letter again, at his wife's words about grace and second chances and being brave enough to love, despite fear. She was right. She'd always been right. Tomorrow he'd reach out to Sylvia. He'd apologize for his harshness, try to explain his fear, ask if maybe they could start over. This time with complete honesty on both sides. Tomorrow he'd be brave. Tonight he held his wife's letter and thanked her for loving him enough to let him go. Devon called the next morning, but Sylvia didn't answer. He left a voicemail that felt inadequate, stumbling words about needing to talk, about being sorry for how he'd reacted. He waited all day for a response that never came. By evening, he knew he couldn't do this over the phone. Some conversations required presence, required looking someone in the eye and being brave enough to show all the messy, complicated feelings underneath. He drove to her building, a glass tower in the financial district that made his old truck look even more out of place. The doorman stopped him at the entrance. "I'm here to see Sylvia Crane, penthouse level. Is she expecting you?" "No, but please, tell her Devon is here. Tell her I need to talk to her." The doorman made a call, spoke quietly, then hung up looking surprised. "She says to send you up." The elevator ride to the 43rd floor felt eternal. Devon's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd rehearsed what to say a dozen times, but now every word had fled his mind. The elevator opened directly into her penthouse. Sylvia stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. She didn't turn when he entered. I wasn't sure you'd let me up, he said. I wasn't sure I would either. Her voice was hollow, exhausted. What do you want, Devon? He stepped closer, saw her reflection in the glass. She looked as broken as he felt, eyes shadowed, face drawn. The Ice Queen facade that had intimidated him months ago was completely gone. She just looked human, hurting. I want to apologize. For how I reacted at the hospital, for the things I said. You had every right to be angry. Maybe, but I was also scared. He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the glittering city. After my wife died, I promised myself I'd never risk that kind of pain again. Loving you, it terrified me. So when I found out about the deception, part of me was almost relieved. It gave me an excuse to run. Sylvia finally looked at him, tears gathering in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I should have told you from the beginning. I was afraid you'd refuse help, afraid you'd see it as pity. But mostly I was afraid of being rejected, of offering something real and having it thrown back. I know. I understand that now. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a worn envelope. Iris gave me this last night. A letter my wife wrote before she died. For when I was ready to love again. He handed it to Sylvia. She read it slowly, and he watched tears stream down her face. She sounds wonderful, Sylvia whispered. She was. And she was right. About all of it. Devon took a shaky breath. I've been hiding behind grief and responsibility and noble suffering, using them as shields so I wouldn't have to be vulnerable again. You made a mistake by not telling me, but I made one too by not giving you grace, by not seeing that you were trying your best with something you didn't know how to handle. Sylvia set the letter down carefully on a nearby table. I manipulated the situation. No matter how good my intentions were, I took away your choice, your autonomy. That wasn't okay. No, it wasn't. But I also wouldn't have accepted help any other way. You were right about that. He turned to face her fully. The question is, can we move past this? Can we start over, but this time with complete honesty? I don't know if you can trust me again. I don't know either. But I want to try. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. These past 3 weeks have been miserable. I kept thinking about all our conversations, all the moments we shared. And I realized something. Those were real. Your feelings were real. Maybe the circumstances weren't ideal, but what we built together, that was genuine. It was, Sylvia said, her voice breaking. Every moment, every conversation. I wasn't pretending. Then let's not throw it away, because we're both scared and flawed and human. He squeezed her hand gently. Let's be scared together. Let's be honest about our mistakes and try to do better. Sylvia looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. I spent 15 years building walls to protect myself. You're asking me to tear them down completely. I'm asking both of us to. I'm terrified too. He smiled sadly. But my wife was right. Love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing someone even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I don't deserve this. Deserve you? Neither of us deserves anything. We're just two broken people trying to be less broken together. He lifted his other hand to her face, wiped away tears with his thumb. Can we try? Really try? Sylvia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. Yes, she whispered. Yes. They stood there for a long moment, hands joined, tears drying on both their faces. The city lights twinkled below them, indifferent to the small miracle happening 43 floors above the street. I need to tell you something else, Devon said quietly. Something I've been carrying. Sylvia waited, her hand still in his. He reached under his shirt collar and pulled out a thin chain. Dangling from it was a simple gold wedding band, worn smooth from years of wear, catching the light as it swayed. I've worn this every day since she died, he said, looking at the ring. Told myself it was to honor her memory. But really I think I was hiding behind it, using it as armor so no one could get close, so I wouldn't have to risk feeling that kind of loss again. Sylvia's breath caught as she watched him carefully remove the chain, holding it in his palm. The ring gleamed there, a symbol of love, but also of grief held too long, of a past that had become a prison. I'm not taking it off because I'm forgetting. Devon continued, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. I'm taking it off because I'm finally ready to honor what she actually wanted for me. A full life. Real happiness. The courage to love again. He walked to a small table near the window and set the chain down gently, reverently, not discarding it, but releasing it, letting it rest rather than carrying it like a weight around his neck. When he turned back to Sylvia, something in his face had changed. Lighter, more open. "I've been living half a life," he said, "working to survive, focusing on Iris, never allowing myself anything just for me. You were the first thing in years that felt like it was mine. Not duty, not responsibility, just something I wanted. And that terrified me more than anything." "I understand that feeling," Sylvia said softly. "I built an empire, but had no one to share it with. Told myself I didn't need connection, that independence was strength. But really I was just afraid. Afraid of being hurt again, afraid of being vulnerable." "We're quite a pair," Devon said with a small, genuine smile. "Two people so scared of pain that we almost chose loneliness instead." "Almost," Sylvia stepped closer. "But we're choosing differently now?" "We are." He reached for her other hand, holding both now. "No more hiding, no more half-truths or walls or protective distance. Just honest, messy, complicated truth. Even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," Sylvia agreed. They stood facing each other fully now, and Devon felt something shift in his chest. Not the absence of fear, he was still terrified, but the willingness to feel it and move forward anyway. That was what bravery actually meant. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sylvia's answer was to close the distance between them. The kiss was tentative at first, both of them cautious, testing, then deeper, more certain. Years of loneliness and fear and carefully constructed walls crumbling in the space between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I'm going to mess this up sometimes," Devon said, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm stubborn and prideful and terrible at asking for help. I'm controlling and guarded, and I solve problems by throwing money at them," Sylvia countered. "So we're both disasters, complete disasters." She smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. "But maybe we can be disasters together." "I'd like that." He kissed her again, softer this time. "What do we do now?" "Now?" Sylvia pulled back enough to look at him properly. "Now we take it one day at a time. We learn each other honestly. We make mistakes and forgive them. We build something real. Starting from the beginning, starting from right now." She glanced at the wedding ring resting on the table, then back at Devon. "Your wife was wise. She knew that real love doesn't diminish when you love again. It expands." She did know that. Devon followed her gaze to the ring. "I think she'd like you. I think she'd be glad I found someone who challenges me, who sees through my walls." "I hope so." They moved to the couch, sitting close, hands still intertwined. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, about their fears and hopes, and the difficult work of building trust after it's been broken, about Iris and her return to school, about the Mercedes restoration that had brought them together, about what came next. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Devon prepared to leave. He had work in a few hours, and Iris would worry if he didn't come home. At the door, Sylvia caught his hand one more time. "Thank you for giving me another chance, for seeing past my mistakes to what I was trying to do. Thank you for caring enough to make those mistakes in the first place." He kissed her forehead. "I'll call you later?" "I'd like that." After he left, Sylvia stood at her window watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. Her penthouse felt different now, still quiet but no longer empty. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. 6 months later, the world looked different. Not dramatically different. The city still sprawled below Sylvia's windows. Kurt's shop still smelled of oil and metal. Iris still studied her teaching materials with fierce determination. But the small shifts mattered most. The details that made life worth living. The Mercedes restoration was complete. It sat now in Sterling Auto's showroom, gleaming under careful lighting. a testament to patience and craft and working through difficulties to create something beautiful. Sylvia and Devin had finished it together over long evenings, their hands working side by side, conversation flowing as naturally as breathing. The car represented more than restoration. It was a reminder that broken things could be made whole again. That damage didn't define worth. That with care and time and willingness to do the hard work, beauty could emerge from struggle. Sylvia ran her fingers along the polished chrome, remembering the day she'd brought it here, how suspicious she'd been, and how closed off. That woman felt like a stranger now. Still admiring your handiwork? Devin's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him wiping his hands on a rag, that familiar gesture she'd watched 100 times. But now she knew what those hands felt like holding hers, knew the gentleness in them, the strength. Our handiwork, she corrected. I couldn't have finished it without you. I'm pretty sure that's not true, but I'll take the compliment. He moved closer, slipping an arm around her waist with the casual comfort of established intimacy. Ready for tonight? Tonight, the hospital gala, the one where Devin and Iris would speak about the anonymous fund that had saved their lives. Except now everyone would know the donor's identity. Sylvia had insisted on it. No more hiding, no more deception. Just honest acknowledgement of what had happened and why. Nervous, she admitted. Me too. Public speaking terrifies me. He kissed her temple. But we'll be fine. We'll tell the truth. That's all we can do. The gala was elegant without being ostentatious, the hospital foundation's way of honoring donors while keeping focus on the cause. Sylvia wore a simple navy dress, Devin a suit that Iris had helped him pick out. They arrived together, fingers intertwined, presenting themselves as what they were. A couple built on honesty after stumbling through deception. Iris met them in the lobby, radiant in a green dress that matched her eyes. Her hair had grown back fully, thick and dark. She looked healthy, alive, ready to embrace the future she'd fought so hard to reach. You both look terrified, she observed cheerfully. Your father's about to speak in front of 200 people, Sylvia said. Terror is appropriate. You'll be fine, Dad. Just speak from the heart. That's all anyone wants. When their moment came, Devin walked to the podium with Sylvia beside him. They'd decided to do this together, to tell the story as partners rather than separate pieces. Devin spoke first about Iris's diagnosis, the crushing weight of medical debt, the desperation of watching your child suffer while being unable to help. His voice was steady, honest about the fear and helplessness. Then Sylvia took over, explaining how she'd discovered their situation, how her own past had made her afraid of direct honesty, how she'd tried to help while protecting everyone, including herself, from vulnerability. She didn't make excuses, just acknowledged the truth. She'd been wrong to hide it, and she'd learned that real connection required real honesty. I thought I was protecting Devin's pride, Sylvia said, looking at him. But really, I was protecting myself. It took almost losing him to understand that love, real love, requires courage. The courage to be seen completely, flaws and all. Devin took her hand on stage. And it requires grace. The grace to accept that people make mistakes while trying their best. We almost let fear and pride destroy something beautiful. I'm grateful we chose differently. The audience applauded, but Sylvia barely heard it. She was looking at Iris in the front row, tears streaming down her face, smiling so widely it must have hurt. After the speeches, donors mingled with families helped by the fund. Sylvia met parents fighting the same battles Devin had fought, saw the same exhaustion and determination in their eyes. She quietly pledged to expand the fund significantly, not as publicity, but because she finally understood what wealth was actually for. Not accumulation, not status, but making impossible things possible for people who deserved better than what life had dealt them. Later, much later, the three of them sat on Sylvia's balcony, Devin, Iris, and Sylvia. The city spread below them like scattered stars. Who would have thought following someone could lead to this? Iris mused. I followed him looking for answers, Sylvia said softly. Found something better, a family. Devin squeezed her hand. The richest woman in the city learning that some things can't be bought. Only earned, Sylvia agreed. Through opening your heart, even when it terrifies you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. Three people who'd been alone, now whole. Three lives that had intersected by accident and stayed together by choice. The Mercedes sat in Sylvia's private garage now, fully restored and perfect. But she rarely drove it. It had served its purpose, bringing her to a small auto shop where a tired mechanic with worn boots and an enormous heart had taught her what really mattered. Not buildings or empires or carefully protected walls, but love, connection, the courage to show up for people even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That was true wealth. And Sylvia had finally learned how to spend it.